Hello everyone, welcome to this beginning bird webinar. My name is Valerie and I work with the Okanagan-Similkameen Stewardship Society. This program was originally run as workshops in the community a few years ago in conjunction. Hello everyone, welcome to our beginner birding webinar series. My name is Valerie, I work with the Okanagan-Similkameen Stewardship Society. This program was originally run as workshops in the community a few years ago in conjunction with Matthias Bieber, who is a local bird expert. So thanks so much to him for all the work he did on this presentation originally. So before we start, I'm just going to let people know who we are, so what OSS is. We're a local nonprofit charity and we're based out of the Okanagan and Similkameen valleys. So part of our mission is workshops just like this. You can see Matthias in the top photo giving this presentation a couple of years ago, and below is a photo from one of our community plantings in conjunction with the City of Penticton and TD Tree Days. Much of our work centers around our Wildlife Habitat Steward program. This is the program that allows us to partner with those local landowners to help them care for the habitats on their properties. Within this program, we're able to help people by doing native plant revegetation, assisting with recommendations for invasive plant management, even just providing information if that's what's needed. And we work with a huge variety of landowners. So a stewarded property isn't just someone's personal home property. We have orchardists, viticulturists, ranchers, bed and breakfasts, golf courses. If you are interested in this program and came to this presentation from somewhere other than our website, you can visit us at the link below, osstewardship.ca/stewards. But I digress, back to the birding. So this webinar series is broken up into 3 parts, or else it might get a little overwhelming. So before we get started, I just want to say that if you do happen to have a bird book in the house somewhere, I would highly recommend pausing and going to get it, because there are going to be a couple activities that you might need it for. If you don't have one though, that's totally fine. You can still learn a lot from this presentation and from this series. So over the next little while, I'll just be going over some of the reasons why birding is great, and then spend the majority of the time in this webinar explaining how to go about birding and identifying a bird you don't know. So birding is great for a lot of reasons. It's very relaxing, very zen, gets you outdoors. Birds are really beautiful to look at in general, and you're always learning. So no matter how many years you've been birding, you're always still going to be learning about birds and learning different things about observing them. You can really do it anywhere and everywhere. Birds are anywhere and everywhere. You can merge hobbies and get into photography if you like. And it's always nice to try and be better at your friends in something. So when you first start out, it's a really good idea to spend some time getting familiar with your bird guide. I'll go into the bird guides a little bit in part 3, but the nice thing is about bird guides is that they're all laid out in the same order. So they're always going to start with waterfowl and ducks, you know, kind of progress through the families. You'll get to birds of prey and that sort of thing, and end with the songbirds, finishing with finches. This makes it simpler to find birds. If you see a duck, you know to look near the front of the book. A small sparrow-like songbird is going to be somewhere near the end, most likely. Guidebooks are always going to provide you with specific information for each bird. So they're going to give you some sort of map or description of their range, so where you can find them. There's going to be notes on their markings and descriptions of the birds themselves, as well as descriptions of their habitats or any behaviors. Though it may seem a little silly, spending some time with your guidebook at the beginning and learning its ins and outs and sort of how it works is going to save a lot of time and frustration later. So a few things to know, a few tips about birding and bird ID before we really get into the how-tos. When you do first see a bird, be prepared to make a couple notes. That is the best way to start out. Try really hard to observe as much as you can in those couple seconds that you see it, and then make notes so you don't forget things later on. There is also some language associated with birds that you can see on the diagrams here, mostly concerning their markings. So some is going to be pretty simple, like head or throat, but there are going to be words like crown, coverts, leading edge of the wing that are really good to learn, because these are all places that your bird book might reference that a bird is going to have different markings. So when we first start going through all of these tips and all these ways to identify birds, it is going to seem like a lot of things to remember at once, a lot of things to consider when identifying a bird. And there are a lot of things to remember and consider. But this is really like any hobby. At first, it always seems a little overwhelming. If you knit or crochet, the first time you do it, it probably seems like you don't know what you're doing and the patterns don't make sense. But after a while, you get it. And if maybe you're into photography, the first time you opened Photoshop was probably very confusing and very overwhelming. So like anything, you just take it one step at a time, and learn just through trial and error and through doing it, and eventually it comes to you. So right when you first see a bird, try and note its size and shape. So is it large and slim? Is it small and round? Does it stand really tall and straight like a heron, or kind of seem a bit squat like a pigeon? Looking at all these bird silhouettes here, it might be scary, but even without the labels, you can tell that the bottom left-hand one is a hawk, or maybe the one near the top right is a woodpecker. A lot of these you might really kind of know and not even know you know. So when you're thinking about a bird and looking at a bird, try and compare its size to a bird that you do know. Was it bigger than a robin or smaller than a robin? Did it have a really, really long beak like a woodpecker, or a tiny short stubby beak? This will help you narrow down what family or what section of your bird book to look in at first. So remember that not all birds are going to be found in all areas. So like I said, your bird book is going to tell you the range of your bird. It's also likely going to color code where and at what time of the year each bird can be found in an area. So for the fictional bird in the map here, it's not going to be found anywhere in BC during the winter. And only in the summer can you find it only in the northeast corner of the province. So that's something to remember when you're identifying a bird. Make sure that it's actually in your area at that time of the year. Otherwise, you don't really have to pay much attention to it at that time. So right away, when you look at a new bird or a bird that you're trying to identify, you can also look to see what it's doing, what its general behavior is. So was it alone? Was it with a lot of other birds of the same species? Was it walking like a crow or a pigeon, or was it hopping around like a sparrow? Once you get better at observing birds, you can also look for how it flies. There are a lot of distinctive flight patterns for birds as well, as you can see on the bottom of the screen here. Other behavior clues to look for include their foraging behavior, or how they're searching for food. Some birds are going to eat seeds and berries, so they're going to be picking away at pine cones, at berry bushes. Other birds are going to be picking at the ground, or maybe darting out to catch flying insects if they're an insect-eating bird. Some birds are going to be singing and singing and singing. That's one of their characteristics. And then others, maybe like a great gray owl, like you can see down at the bottom there, they almost never make noise outside of the breeding season. So all of these things are going to help you build a picture of your bird, and it will help you realize or figure out what kind of bird you're looking at. So birds are also going to have very defined habitats that they like to live in. If you think about it, when was the last time you saw a duck in the forest? That just doesn't happen. Some birds are going to want to live in marshes. Some birds like living in grasslands, and so on and so forth. So being really cognizant or really aware of the habitat that you're birding in and which birds may or may not be there is also going to be really helpful. What's interesting too, though, is that there are smaller microhabitats within each kind of larger habitat. So think of how you might see a sparrow and an owl in the forest, but you're probably not going to see the owl in a scrubby rose bush. They're always going to be in the trees, usually pretty far up top. And at the same time, you're probably not going to see that sparrow way at the top of the tree either. They're really going to like poking around in those dense thickets of rose bushes. I mean, you're not going to confuse an owl with a sparrow, but it does illustrate a point. And of course, there are a bird's colors and markings. There is amazing beauty and diversity of color within bird families. And this is one of the reasons why it is really important to know that bird topography, or the names for the different parts of a bird that I showed earlier. For instance, this northern flicker, it's a large black patch on its chest, but it has black spots or speckles on its breast. And those are going to be important distinctions depending on what kind of bird you're looking at. But the reason I waited so long to talk about color and markings is because they can be extremely variable and very, very fickle. So even really distinctive markings can fool us, like the bright green head of a mallard duck. In the early summer, the male ducks don't actually have those green heads. They're going to molt and look more like females for the summer before getting those green heads again for the next breeding season. So it's important to try not to base your identifications on color alone. You should try to factor in all these other things we talked about, like size and shape and their behavior, where they are, their habitat, their range, all those things create a good picture of what kind of bird you're looking at. There are a few other things to be cautious about though. I did already mention color. But there are things like size and scale. So that bird of prey in the top photo is probably going to be quite big, but it's really hard to know exactly how big it is because it's just silhouetted against the sky. There's nothing really to give you scale. Again, just noting color, that hummingbird on the far right-hand middle side, that hummingbird doesn't actually have a yellow throat. That's just a bunch of pollen from all the flowers that it's been visiting. So in the winter, birds are going to puff themselves up when it's cold, like that little junco in the bottom left-hand corner, and they're going to look a bit fatter and bigger than they usually are. So that's just also a few things to to keep in mind. So to summarize a lot of these tips, just try not to base your identification on a single factor. Try to bring in a bunch of different things that help you decide what kind of bird you saw. And if you're getting frustrated with not seeing birds, maybe you're seeing the same birds all the time and nothing different, you can shake it up a little bit. Maybe go somewhere else, or if mobility is difficult, you can even just try a different time of day. And don't think that you have to learn all the birds in your bird book at once. You can learn the really common ones first. Learn the backyard birds is usually what they're called, the birds that you see flying around bird feeders and in your backyard. And if you learn them really well, it gives you something to compare other new birds to. So for instance, you see mallard ducks all the time in the left-hand photo there. And then one day you come across a smaller duck like the one in the front, that bufflehead, and you can say, oh, I've never seen that duck before, but it's smaller than a mallard. So you'll be able to base your identification on waterfowl that are smaller than mallards. Or if you see a junco for the first time, you can note, oh, that bird has a lot more black on its head than a chickadee does, if you're familiar with the chickadees. So knowing the characteristics and behaviors of birds and how to look for those things is a really important thing about birding and bird identification. But if you spend some time to try and learn a few basic characteristics of each bird group, it can give you a big head start when you first see a brand new bird that you've never observed before. There are a lot of groups of birds. Like I mentioned before, though, you probably do already know some of them without really even thinking about it. So everyone knows what an owl looks like or what a duck looks like in general. Those are some pretty simple groups. But there are a lot of groups that can look very, very similar. So something like a flycatcher or a sparrow or a finch, that little group of small birds on the left-hand side, to a brand new birder, those are going to look very, very similar. So in the next part 2, we're going to be going through a few of these tricky bird groups